Hey there, it's Mr. Todd. I like to teach math, and here is your problem of the day. The problem of the day today has to do with simplifying ratios. It's always nice to simplify something, make it easier to understand. So today we're going to do it with ratios. Okay, let's get this done. Okay, here we are. It is the problem of the day, and I think that it is important to think about this as your daily step to getting to be a better problem solver in math. Every day you do a little bit more, you stretch a little bit further, you get a little stronger, and your math ability starts to feel like something you're good at. So, let's read this problem and see what we can do with it. Your supervisor at work tells you to make up a batch of cleaning solution. The chemical cleaning products label says to mix 8 fluid ounces of chemical to 2 quarts of water. Now, you know that 1 quart equals 32 ounces. That's important. Express the dilution ratio, we'll talk about what that means, the ratio of chemical to water in simplest form. Okay, now this is a pretty simple situation. You have to do some cleaning at your job, and you need to use some chemical cleaning product. I got a picture of that right here. And the chemical cleaning product maybe has some information on the label, and the label tells you how to use it. And you know that you're supposed to mix this chemical because it's concentrated and maybe, a little bit too strong when it comes right out of the bottle. It's concentrated, so you have to dilute it. Dilute it with water, and that's what we're talking about when we have this word dilution. You're supposed to mix the chemical and the water, but the problem has to do with how much chemical and how much water you're going to put together. Now, it does give you instructions on that, so I'm going to encourage you to think about the information that I've given you so far and to work it out. Pause the video right here. Pause it and see if you can think about this problem on your own and get as far as you can. Read over the question again, write down what you know, and maybe some of the strategies that you think would help you. Now, pause it, and when you turn back on, we'll go over the solution. Okay, hopefully you took some time and you did a little work on this problem. But now let's do some things that I think might be able to help you if you got a little bit stuck or if you're not sure of yourself. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about ratios. I'm going to just move that problem right out of the way, and we're going to talk about ratios. Now, what is a ratio? Well, a ratio is a comparison of two numbers. So you could have, let's say the number 2 and the number 4. And let's just imagine a situation where I reach in my pocket and I pull out 6 coins, and 2 of those coins are quarters, and 4 of those coins are dimes. So I would say the ratio of quarters to dimes would be 2 to 4. Now, don't get confused by the words 2, 2. I'm not saying the same word. I'm saying the number 2 to the number 4. So this is a ratio. I'm just comparing the number I have of one thing to the number I have of another, 2 to 4. Now, ratios can be rewritten in a couple different ways. You can write a ratio with a colon. This is the colon format for writing ratios. 2, those are 2 dots, 2 to 4. We say it the same way as I wrote it with the word TO, too. Or you could write it in a fraction format where the first number goes on top and the second number goes on the bottom. So we wouldn't read this as a fraction. We wouldn't say 2/4. We would say this is 2 to 4, right? Now, here's where the word simplifying comes in. To simplify means to make something simpler, to make it easier. In math, when we're talking about ratios or fractions, what we mean is using lower numbers, or numbers that are smaller, to express the ratio in a more simplified way. So if I had 2 quarters and 4 dimes, what I could say is that for every 1 quarter, I have 2 dimes. I'm actually going to draw a little bit of a picture here. Let's say that this is a quarter, and this is a quarter. I have 2 quarters, and I have 4 dimes. And we're going to say that each one of these is a dime. I'll try and write a little D in each one of them. And you can kind of picture the ratio visually right here. I have 2 quarters, and I have 4 dimes. So there you go, 2 to 4. But if you wanted to think about it even simpler, you could say, well, look, for this quarter I have 2 dimes, and for this quarter I have 2 dimes. And so really what I'm saying is that for every quarter there are 2 dimes. In fact, I could even add, I'll do it in red, I could even add a third quarter and 2 more dimes to make 6 dimes, and I would still have the same ratio. I could still say the same thing, that for every for every 1 quarter, there are 2 dimes. And you can see that. I've drawn boxes around 1 quarter and 2 dimes. And that's what we're talking about with ratios that are simplified. In other words, you're getting it down to the more basic numbers in the ratio. Okay? So let's keep that in mind as we go to our problem. I'm going to go back up here, and we're thinking about the ratio of chemical to the ratio of water. So I'm going to actually write those words out. I'm going to write it over here. I'm going to say, look, we want the ratio of chemical, how much water, or how much chemical we're going to use, and we're going to put that over how much water. Okay, let me fix my A. Make that A look more like an A and not like a D. Okay, so we have a certain amount of chemical that we're supposed to use and a certain amount of water. We have that information here. It says that we're supposed to mix 8 fluid ounces of chemical to 2 quarts of water. So I'm going to write that. We're going to write 8 fluid ounces, which I abbreviate with just an OZ, ounces. Even fluid ounces are abbreviated OZ. And water. I'm supposed to use 2 quarts, and quarts are abbreviated QTS. Okay, so 8 ounces to 2 quarts. Now there's a ratio. That is a ratio, but there's a little bit of a problem that you might notice with this ratio. One number is referring to ounces with its unit. The chemical is in ounces, and the water is in quarts. Now that's a problem. But I did give you a little bit of information. I told you that 1 quart equals 32 ounces. So if 1 quart equals 32 ounces, then 2 quarts, well, 2 quarts is going to equal 2 times 32. 2 times 32 ounces. Because 1 quart, 32 ounces, 2 quarts is going to be 2 times that, and doing a quick little mental multiplication, that is going to give me 64 ounces. So if I wanted to rewrite this ratio with just ounces and ounces, I would say that I have 8 ounces of chemical, and I'm going to put in 64 ounces of water. I'm going to mix those two things together. So you have a ratio now, and it's all in ounces. Now this is where we get to the simplifying part, right? Now I might have to do another video on simplifying ratios and simplifying fractions, but for now I'm just going to ask you to think about the two numbers 8 and 64 and think about their factors. What numbers go into these two numbers? The factors of 8 and the factors of 64. Now I'm just going to go through this really quickly. The factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. Those are all the numbers that can be divided into 8 evenly, or you could think of it as the numbers that you could use to multiply to get 8. The factors of 64 are 1, 2, 4, 8, notice the pattern there, it's the same as 8, 16, 32, and 64. Oops, 64. Now, I want you to look at those two lists of factors, and a lot of times you don't have to write this down, but it's good to understand it. There's one number there's one number that's on both lists. Actually, four numbers that are on both lists, but there's one number that is the biggest number that is on both, and that is 8 and 64. I'm sorry, 8 and 8. 8 goes into 8 and 8 goes into 64, and it's the largest number on both lists. So what we're going to do up here is we're going to simplify this ratio by dividing by that greatest common factor, the greatest number that goes into both 8 and 64. And what we're going to get is a ratio that looks like this. 8 goes into 8 one time, and 64 divided by 8 is 8, and there you have it. That is our simplified ratio, our dilution ratio. We should put in 1 ounce of chemical for every 8 ounces of water. That is our answer, and we are done. Okay, for just a little bit of extra practice with working with ratios and simplifying them, I've given you 6 ratios here, and let's see if you can go ahead and write each one of them in simplest form using the method that I showed you in the earlier video. Go ahead and pause here and work these out on your own paper, and then restart the video, and I'll give you the answers. Okay, hopefully you took some time to look at these. I'm sure you noticed that some of the ratios are in fraction format, and some of the ratios are in that format where they use the 2 dots, the colon. But we would say them all the same way, and I think that the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we rewrote everything in fraction format. So let's take a look at the first one. It already is in fraction format. We have to think about what's the greatest common factor of 4 and 12. And the greatest common factor is 4. I always like to try and see if the smallest number will go into the other number, and indeed it does. And 4 goes into 4 once, so my top number is 1, and 4 goes into 12 3 times. So my ratio, when simplified, is 1 to 3. Okay, the second one, I'm going to rewrite it in fraction format, and I'm going to think about what is the greatest common factor, what factor goes into 32 and 20, and that is 4 again. So if you divide 4 into the top and bottom numbers, you will get 8 over 5. Now notice that does look like an improper fraction. The number on the top is bigger, but that's okay in ratios. You often will have ratios that look like improper fractions. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just leave it like that. Let's do the next one. 7 over 35. Rewrite it. And we find the number that will go into both. The greatest number that goes into both is 7. And that will give us a simplified ratio of 1 to 5. 1 to 5. This next one, another improper fraction looking thing. The ratio is 28 to 8. When we simplify it, the number that goes into both, the greatest common factor, is 4. So 4 goes into 28 7 times, and 4 goes into 8 2 times. So 7 to 2 is our simplified ratio. This next one, 18 over 27. The greatest common factor is 9. 9 goes into both 18 and 27. 9 goes into 18 2 times, and it goes into 27 3 times. So my ratio is 2 to 3. This last one, 60 over 25, you might notice just by looking at it that one ends in 5, one ends in 0, and that gives us a big clue about what our number is. The number that will go into both of those numbers is 5. 5 goes into any number that ends in 5 or 0. So 5 goes into 60 12 times, and 5 goes into 25 5 times. So my ratio is 12 to 5 when simplified. Okay, hopefully those gave you a little bit of practice with simplifying ratios. We are done.